Okay, thank you for staying there, Gilbert. We'll go ahead with the roll call.
All right, let's go and start now. Albert Letzkus. John Winchester. Dan Ekstrom. Melissa Brown Dominguez. Charlene Robinson. Here. Tom Berensney. Here. Lucretia Free.
Present.
Frank Santa Cruz. Ed Verberg.
Here.
John Bernal. Here. Tom McGovern.
Here.
Ramon Valadez. They are present. Okay. All right, perfect. So it looks like we do have a quorum.
Yeah, can you say their names?
Yeah, so again, John Winchester and Melissa Brown Dominguez are present, and we do have a quorum.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Could we get the view off, I apologize.
Okay, that was Frank. Okay, all of you received the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple corrections I'd like to make if possible.
Okay, if we have a motion, we can do the discussion and have the corrections.
Sorry.
So if you want to make a motion to
I'll
approve,
make a motion to approve.
do we have a second? Okay, any comments or revisions?
I do it, Mr. Chair, thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this is Tom McGovern. I noticed under item 6, the RTA briefing, that Mr. Beresny had asked a question about a transit project between Tucson and the airport, and it was listed as a sewer project on the minutes. That should be corrected to say transit.
Very good. Are there other revisions, Tom?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. On the last paragraph on page 3, the first sentence where it said, Administrator had recently sent correspondence to the Vail Tour to Tucson. That should really say referencing the L Tour to Tucson.
Okay.
And then the comment that Mr. McGovern just made, under item 6, that should really read Norte-Sewer, S-U-R, with the S-U-R capitalized and italicized, which is south for, with the Spanish for south. So it's a north-south line.
Okay, any other revisions?
Isn't it Tucson Norte Sewer?
Norte-Sewer.
Tucson Norte Sewer Plan.
Right.
East.
Something similar to that. I think I read in the news it was Norte Sewer.
Okay, with those 3 revisions, any others? So all in favor of the minutes with the amendments that were suggested, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yeah, we got a little delay with our friends that are online, so stick with us, though. Okay, let's go to Director Olivares for a presentation on the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll wait for if I could sing, there'd be music, but I can't. Oh, thank you. That's okay. This one. Let me just make sure the clicker is working. That's okay. Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. My name is Ana Olivares. I'm the director of the Transportation Department, and I'm going to give you a budget overview for fiscal year 23, which will start this July 1st of 2022. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I'm going to go over we have, at the Department of Transportation, we have two budgets. We have the operational budget, and then we have our capital improvement budget. So I'm going to go over first with our operational budget, which is what we use for all of our maintenance and operations that we do in the Department of Transportation. So our planned expenditures for fiscal year 23, as you can see, are at $111.6 million. And there will also be transfers. That's money, $37.4 million. So that's money that we pay for debt service or for money that goes into our CIP program. That is what is called the transfers out in our budget. So as you can see, there's a huge percentage for maintenance, and then the debt service, and then our operational. Our operational consists of our staff that do the studies, that do our permit inspections, and that do also our CIP inspections. Next slide. Just some highlights that we have in that budget. As I mentioned, maintenance is one of our biggest items, and that actually includes the amount of $66.8 million for pavement repair and preservation for next year. And the remainder of that is our $32.4 million for road infrastructure maintenance. And that includes all the other maintenance that we do. We have a pavement repair and preservation program, but we have a lot of other maintenance needs throughout the roadway infrastructure. We still do pothole patching. We have a lot of shoulder, road grading, cattle guard, and guardrail. So there's a lot more maintenance to be done. Also in the operation budget that we give transit RTA, and that's a pass-through money that we give to the RTA who manages the unincorporated transit for Pima County DOT. The 5.6, as I mentioned before, that's part of our traffic reviews, construction oversight, and permit inspection. And this year, this doesn't happen every year, right? But this year we're going to transfer $5.2 million to a capital improvement. That's our local funding that will go to the Sunset Road project for our capital improvement budget. And another big portion of our budget is the debt service. We are still paying on the 1997 HURF bond program, that's 11. And then that $21 million is for the certificates of participation that were used to advance the pavement repair. So that needs to be paid off, and if you remember in the beginning of our pavement repair and preservation program, there was PAYGO money that was coming every year. As we've advanced some of that funding, it was borrowed using the certificates of participation. So now that debt needs to be paid. So the original planned money that was coming in is to offset that debt payment. It's almost a wash when you see the revenues in that debt for that COPS funding. Next slide. Part of our budget here is the oversight of the planned revenues. We expect to get the $77.7 million, and that's the majority of the funding from the Highway User Revenue Fund and the vehicle license tax. That makes up a huge amount of that. And then we have the transfers in this year. As I said before, we have the transfers in to pay the debt service, and we have the transfers in for the $50 million to accelerate in fiscal year 23 the road repair program. So that is the revenue breakdown that you can see there. Next slide. And just some quick highlights of that budget. As we mentioned before, it's the HURF and the VLT, and that is the majority of our revenue that comes in, and some small amounts for permit fees and licenses and the miscellaneous amount that we receive. And the transfers in will be the $50 million that we were going to receive in fiscal year 23 to accelerate the pavement repair program. And the $20 million that was the original amount that was going to come towards for the pavement repair program, well, that will now offset the debt for the acceleration. And we continue received about $120,000 for the graffiti abatement program for from the Board of Supervisors every year, which is very helpful. And you probably can't see that as well, but that is our 5-year capital improvement budget. And the highlights of that, I'll try to read them off here. So we have, oh, I didn't bring that plan. I'm sorry, now I can't read it. So we have at the top, we have our design projects for about $2 million, I believe. And then in the middle is the construction projects that are being managed by Pima County. And on the bottom are construction projects that is pass-through money that sits in our budget, but is going to the other agencies. Most of them are City of Tucson projects, as we transfer their bond projects that the City of Tucson is finishing off for us. And City of Tucson, some local money that we owe for City of Tucson RTA projects. And a big chunk on the bottom is Sunset Road, which will start hopefully construction this fall. That goes from I-10 to River, is going to be done with the ADOT I-10 widening from Ina to Ruthroff. So it'll be combined with that project, so we're going to give them that money for them to do that administration. So that's why it's a big chunk down there. I think our total budget is about $41 million, but of what we're actually managing is close to 20-some million for our department. So that's a quick overview of our CIP budget. Next slide. And it was a quick overview, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Tom.
Hi, Tom Gavin here. I was curious about where the traffic signal and sign maintenance might show up in your budget. You had a couple of slots there, and I wasn't sure if it was under your general operations or somewhere associated with roadway maintenance.
It actually sits, all our traffic signal and signing and marking budget sits in the roadway roadway maintenance budget part. It's part of that 30-some million, I believe, is what it had on there.
Is that a significant number?
It is.
As far as that aspect of the budget?
So it is. Over the years, we've been adding more money, especially for the signal group, to try to replace the soon-to-be failing lights and infrastructure for the signals, as well as we've added money for the sign maintenance and also for the marking. As our revenues have started to improve a little bit, we, of course, are allocating as much as we can to the pavement repair. But if there's additional that comes in, then we try to distribute that with markings, signs, signals, and also our dirt road grading. That has increased a little bit from last year as well. We're trying to get, hopefully, our dirt roads to a good condition, as well as we're working on our pavement roads.
Yeah, the reason I asked was because I know the department wants to move toward smart streets, if you will, and a big part of that is upgrading traffic signal operations and hardware. And I don't know if you're looking at that as a future expenditure, or maybe an RTA, or is it something you're going to try to nibble at and save money for?
So it's all of the above. It's all of the above. Like we said, whatever we have available funding, we try to put in those categories in anticipation of that. We also put in RTA Next, our request for some technology funding, hopefully available to RTA Next, and we nibble at it all the time.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John.
I had a question for you, actually. I know you drafted the department. Did that get finalized and submitted?
It did.
It did.
I thought it was important, like last year, for us to show our support for PAYGO, and assumed that everybody had an opportunity to comment, and there were a couple of revisions. So,
Okay.
But it did go, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Hey, Anna.
Thank you.
Hey, hi, Anna. I drove on Sunday through the Salrito Road Wilmot intersection improvement, and it's looking really, really good. But is there a shared copy? There's a lot for the there's a lot of good channeling being done for the flood waters that have been, or is that all coming out of DOT budget?
So actually, the Wilmot and Sahuarita intersection is being funded with RTA funding.
Okay.
And because if you remember, we did the Wilmot project several years ago, and that was at the time where we were getting really good bids that we don't have right now. So there was a little bit of savings left over on Wilmot Road, or the RTA held it for us, that when it was ready to be signalized, we would apply for that to use a remainder of that money for the intersection. And that's the majority of the funding being used for
Yeah,
that.
there's a lot of good work there to do to handle the flood control on that stretch of Sahuarita Road, too.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I have one. For those who didn't look at it in detail, but the May 18th memorandum from the county administrator to the board actually answered the question, what districts do our projects fall in? So if you're wondering, the question is answered, and I found this to be very helpful, so thank you for sending it to us.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll go to road repair update. Michelle Montenegro and John Bowley, or I'm sorry, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Give us just a minute while we pull up the slides, and then I'll begin the presentation. There you go. Thank you. I will provide a brief update on where we stand. Next slide, please. So we've added several new projects to our substantially complete project list. The central high volume was the Wilmot and Kolb segments that were completed at the beginning of May. Tucson Estates wrapped up just recently. North Point, Raintree, also that was one that I think had just barely got started. May not have even started the last time we met. They were really quick in and out of that subdivisions. Casas Adobes and Wildwood is also another similar one where we were milling and paving. It was a quick turnaround, a 30-day project. The north of CDO curb ramps, that was one of the curb ramp projects that finished up towards the end of May. Next slide, please. In construction, we still have 2 curb ramps ongoing. The south of CDO is pretty much complete. It says 70%, that's where they were billed at the end of last month. Same thing with Countryside, they were 80% billed at the end of last month. Ramps are, except for a few that were held up by some utility lines that were just below the curb ramps when we excavated the sidewalk, that we need to have the utility companies come in and put their lines a little bit lower so then we can put those ramps back in. And then Countryside is wrapping up, I think, as we speak. They have put all the curbs back in so that the milling and paving can continue, and they're just wrapping up the last couple of sidewalks within the Saguaro Vista subdivision. Next slide, please. In construction from the paving perspective, we have our large paving going on. Our large hard bid projects, which are the Board of Supervisor district projects at the beginning, are all underway. District 5 is just starting up, so that will be catching up quickly. That is one of our smallest of the hard bid projects. Arivaca area, that one will be extended. We have been in communication with the contractor on doing the repairs on Arivaca Road. In light of the asphalt shortages that we're experiencing right now, as well as the kind of the looming monsoon season. Those will probably wait until fall. We don't want to open up that road and end up with a big mess on our hands during the monsoon. The Green Valley is well underway as well. They've gotten most of Mission Road done, all of McGee Ranch Road. They were working on Helmet Peak, got a little bit more of the arterial collectors, and then we'll be working on some of the subdivisions down in that area. Southeast milling and paving, that one's kind of been sitting dormant for a little while. They were waiting for school to be letting out before they finish up the last little bit on Marianne Cleveland and down in the J6 area, so that one will quickly be coming to a close. Cardinal Estates and Mission Ridge, that's another one of those quick in and outs. They are well underway. It was 5% build last month, but they're nearing completion at this point. Same thing with Manzanita Terrace. That should be down to the final punch list items at this point. North Point, Saguaro, Shiva, that is one of our subdivisions with Markham. They did get held up a little bit with the concrete work, mostly because the concrete schedule got stretched out because of the concrete rationing. But they have been working very closely with us and with the other contractor to adjust their schedule. They will be coming back for the Countryside Vista, and we'll be finishing up that package at the same time. So they've done both North Point and Saguaro. They are North Point and Shiva, and they are coming back for the Saguaro subdivision. So that will be coming in June. Countryside Vista they've issuing NTP, and bulk of that work will all be happening in June as well. Sunny Hills Estates is in the similar boat, as well as Northwest Metro. So the Sunny Hills Estates, Northwest Metro are both by the same contractor and are very close geographically, so they are going to be essentially operating them as the same project, with the utility lowering going from one subdivision to the next, and then the follow-on paving and so forth. Next slide. Got a couple of new curb ramp project pictures for you. Some of the poor. Next slide, please. Here are some of our paving, it's kind of the before, after, and during for the McGee Ranch Road paving. Kind of shows the condition of where we started. Next slide, please. And then here's similar pictures for the Avra Valley paving that was going on. And Avra Valley is now complete, and they are finishing up the subdivisions up in the Catalina area as we speak. Next slide, please. Recently awarded was the Countryside Vista since the last time we met. The engineer's estimate was just below where our low bid came in. The successful contractor was Markham, and they are prepping to start construction just after the start of June. Next slide, please. Summer Haven, we advertised that one, and we did not get any bids that could fall within the time frame of the June 30th. So that one was re-advertised with a new bid opening of this evening. We also stretched out that construction schedule to allow them to complete work by October 1st. And so we should be having some updates next meeting. Next slide, please. Also re-advertised, similar situation was the Countryside Milling and Paving Project. That one will be opening tomorrow, and so we hope to have good things to report there. That one has a new completion date of September 1st. So we do have those two projects carrying across the fiscal year line. Those projects will be paid for out of the fiscal 22 budget and not be impacting our fiscal 23 list. Next slide, please. Here's kind of a status of where we're at by the numbers. So you can see things are quickly changing into the completed category. We've got a lot of work still going on, and this is all based off of the dollars billed at the end of April. So at this point, it's almost a month old, so that number is quickly changing. So we are anticipating some of these projects to stretch into July just because of the constraints that we're experiencing with asphalt material and concrete shortages. So, but we are preparing for those and getting the contracts all in line. Next slide, please. One of the questions that came up at last meeting was the ADA curb ramp improvements and what kind of impact that has on our overall budget. Excuse me, there are several variables that affect how much cost is, I guess, impacted from one program to the next. The number of curb ramps varies just depending on which subdivisions come up, because the subdivisions are selected by PCI. So we don't really control how much of the subdivisions we are chosen have sidewalks and curb ramps in them already versus what does not. That is basically a completely random at this point. So some of the things that affect is just the number of subdivisions and the number of curb ramps that need to be taken into account, the types of curb values, and curb ramps cost different values, and then just the escalating material costs. But for the last 2 years, despite the difference in the number of curb ramps, we've been running about 8% of our budget.
Mr. Chairman, Michelle, is that similar to what it's been in prior years, or is it's lower?
I wasn't able to find a lot of good information for fiscal year 20, and that would have been our first year. In fiscal year 20, we were running them a little differently because we had curb ramp and curb ramp and asphalt all in the same project. So some of that, it wasn't as a clear cut from a mobilization and some of those other incidental items.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I've been interested in this topic is I doubt that any of us anticipated spending 8 or 10% of our total budget on concrete work as part of this program, but obviously it's a reality, and so going forward, I'm assuming we're all making some judgments about how much to reserve for this kind of work.
Correct, and we build that into the cost estimates that we provide for Street Saver to use when calculating the packages and costs.
Thank you.
Yep. Next slide, please. One of the other questions that came up last meeting was about the benefit cost analysis that's used for our arterial collectors. So kind of the step-by-step, first is it identifies the sections for repair that are the best candidate, which it rates based off of the highest return on the dollars spent. So there's two basic approaches, which is you have a fixed fund, and then you're maximizing the amount of benefit that you can get for those dollars, or you have a set condition, such as ours is PCI of 80 by the end minimum of our 10-year cost to get to that 80 PCI. So for our overall program, we're using the set conditions and minimized costs, and then from an annual basis, we are using the fixed funds and maximized benefit. So we're using both approaches to come up with our lists. So the program is based off of the set conditions, and then the annual list is based off the fixed funds. For the fiscal year lists, it looks at the available funds, or the available budget for the arterial collector. It also, we have in there a percentage of that budget that we set aside for surface treatments, and then it takes into account inflation rate as well. Next slide, please. So, in order to calculate the benefit, it looks at the treatment and what kind of increase we will see for PCI. For a mill and fill, the PCI goes back up to 100, so it's treated like new pavement. And so that benefit is very high, but also there's also a high cost. And then for a surface treatment, it calculates where that new PCI will be, and then it redraws those curves. And so that area between the old curve and the new curve is the benefit. Okay, next slide. So they also have a weighted effectiveness ratio, which takes into account the use of the road, which is, whether it's an arterial, a collector, the amount of volume. So then based off of the benefit cost, then it's also weighted for the need. So the milling and paving is separated into one group, and then the surface groups treatments are separated into a separate group. All the roads needing mill and paves are then assigned and ranked based off of the lowest from highest to lowest weighted effective ratio. And then the same process is used for the surface treatments. And so we use the ones that give us the best benefit down the list until we run out of money. Next slide, please. Okay, so Are there any questions at this point for the fiscal '22 program or for the 88 curb ramp or benefit cost analysis?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Tom?
Yeah, just one comment. I sat in with the Freeport-McMoran Community Partnership Panel last week, and we talked about the roads, and folks out there, the employees especially, are ecstatic over the condition of McGee Ranch Road now. And Mr. Chair, that's in District 3, your district, but they are just happy, happier than all get out that that road is finally fixed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a question about
Yes, John?
the estimates these days, Michelle.
Yes.
I noticed we awarded one contract that was 20% over the engineer's estimate. So we must have to be adjusting our estimates going forward by how much?
We have been looking at the bids coming in and then adjusting as we go. Because there has been a lot of volatility this year. I think last year we were able to keep our pricing for our engineer's estimate pretty consistent throughout the year. This year, as we've seen bid prices go, we've also adjusted those bid prices up, which is why we knew essentially back in December that we were going to be exceeding our budget, and luckily we're able to compensate with our operation.
But I assume the adjustments are substantial.
They have been. I was just looking at the numbers from a cost per square foot, square yard, and at the beginning of this fiscal year, we were getting about $15 per square yard. Didn't matter whether it was jock or hard bid. That cost was pretty consistent for the milling and paving. The most recent ones were up to 30, so it's doubled.
Wow,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yes, that, definitely substantial. Tom, did you have another question?
Yeah, I think Tom McGovern was on the phone
Oh.
also.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go to
Get him
Tom
first.
McGovern, because
Thank you,
in the back.
One of the, kind of building on John's question, one of the things that we worried about is with this unprecedented amount of money being poured into the pavement preservation program, would there be enough capacity in the local contracting community to do this? I know we have, by local now, we include Phoenix, because we do get Phoenix companies to bid, but with a couple of these projects that you presented failing to get any bids and having to be rebid because of timing, I'm wondering if that's an issue of just not enough jock contractors as just one simple data point, or if it really speaks to the kind of saturation of the market now, buying all of this money that we're putting into it.
I think we had a very aggressive year with our 85.5 billion, thank you. The numbers are starting to blend. With the $85 million program that we had this year, I think it would have been much more doable had we not had the asphalt shortages, the concrete shortages, and everything that stretched out our timeline, so that everything is starting to hit. Challenges with asphalt plants breaking down, we've had challenges with concrete, we've had challenges with like the asphalt plants running out of oil. The cement shortage affects the asphalt as well, because we have a percentage of our asphalt mix has cement in there. So all of these things are compounding, which has put a lot of extra strain, I think, on the community as well, as they're trying to work around those challenges and still deliver the projects on time. In a normal environment where we didn't have the material shortages, I think it would have looked very different.
Well, I think you also wouldn't have the kind of inflation that you're seeing locally,
Yeah.
as far as construction costs.
That is part of it too as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good. Is that it for all the questions, or are there others? Tom?
I have one more, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Back on your slide, it was the last slide, I think, on the benefit cost analysis, where you talk about the weighted effectiveness ratio. And you had mentioned, Michelle, use of road plus volume.
Well, the use
How
of
does that work? Yeah.
yeah, it's the volume that
So was a traffic volume study done, or is it because of X number of
local roads or collectors going into an arterial, how is that volume taken into effect? Because, and the question becomes, if I have a segment of road that has a PCI rating very similar in close proximity to another segment of a road that has parts of it that are extremely bad, so if that large section would be separated out, you'd have multiple PCI ratings. But let's say a mile and a half section of that road has a lot of volume. I mean, school buses and a lot of traffic. How is that taken into consideration when selecting the arterials and collectors to be repaid?
So part of it is through managing the sections that we look at.
Right.
So a section is typically, we try to keep it a mile or less. There are some of the rural ones where the characteristics kind of stay the same for longer periods of time, where we've extended out that section. But we try to keep the management sections broken up by the characteristics of the road, when it was between, what is a heavy arterial versus more of a rural arterial blended into the same section.
Yeah, because my question is specifically for White House Canyon Road, where the first mile and a half or so from Continental Road to Continental Elementary is very heavily traveled, and the road is breaking down. But it's over a 7-mile road, and it has one PCI rating. The PCI rating is 53. And so there's a lot of concern that I've fielded, and Supervisor Christie's office has fielded, and the Green Valley Council's Traffic and Royals Committee has fielded, and why can't that section of White House Canyon Road get fixed? Because it's in pretty bad shape.
Okay, we will definitely take that into consideration
Okay,
and look
thank
at
you.
that road.
Well, and thank you, Tom, because there are actually a couple of public comments on that we'll get to in a little bit. So you're in harmony there. Very good. Thank you, Michelle. And then is Jason?
Yep, I'm going to turn it over to our program manager, Jason, to fill us in on the fiscal year 23 program.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee members. So I only have one slide, making it nice and easy on you guys this time around. So giving a little taste of where we're going for our fiscal 23 program. So as was mentioned, we have $66.8 million for our total budget. And this slide, we have a breakdown of where that funding is going. So from a local road perspective, we are looking at so it's $35 million and 60, 90. The numbers are just small enough, I can't quite read them.
You want to come over here, because I can read them just fine.
Yeah, you want to read me the numbers?
Come use my microphone. It's okay. Come on.
All right, we'll switch spots real fast. So we have $35 million and 95.8 miles of local roadways that are on next year's program. That's 49 different subdivisions that we are going to be doing, and then 17 additional local roadway segments that aren't associated with a subdivision. And as we mentioned before, some of these will have ADA ramp upgrades that need to happen, but certainly not all of the roadways. The portion that's going for arterial and collector roadways, for the mill and pave, we have $29 million that's going to be allocated to that. That's about 94.5 miles of road. Those were all chosen on the benefit cost ratio that Michelle just talked about. And we also prioritized collector roads that were in subdivisions. So the subdivisions that are on our local list, if there was a collector road that just entered into that subdivision, we made sure to grab that while we were doing the rest of that subdivision so that all of it can be treated together. All total, that we have 70 different arterial collector roadway segments that are on the list for next year. And then from a surface treatment standpoint for our arterial collector roads, we have 2.7, about 94.5 miles chosen well for that one. Again, these were chosen on a benefit cost ratio, and there's about 60 different roadway segments that have been chosen for that. And that roadway surface treatment list is a combination of different treatments that includes crack sealing, fog sealing, micro seals, chip seals. So all of that is included in that section. And that is what I have so far. The list itself should be on our website here very shortly, within the next few days. And by the middle of next week, the lovely GIS map that hopefully all of you are familiar with that shows all of the roadway segments will be updated to include all of the roads for next. With that, we'll take any questions. I guess I'll switch spots with you again.
Okay, I can't read it from here either, so. Go ahead, Tom. Tom had a question.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Yeah, so county administration did post to the Board of Supervisors the list last week, so it's up on the county's website now.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's.
Our transportation website, I don't think it's up yet. That's what I was
Yeah, I know
saying.
the cute
Yeah.
interactive map, I don't think is up there yet, but so, in reviewing it, the folks down in the area of District 4 that I deal with are pretty much happy with the roads that have been selected down in that area, you know, I've been from the beginning. I sat in with, since the beginning, I sat in with Mr. DeBonus's first briefing to the Green Valley community back in the fall of 2019 before it was even approved. So, and my predecessor on this committee, Don Weaver, was a big advocate of that. So just really appreciate all the hard work that the Department of Transportation goes into to try to make this across the board as fair and use the word equitable as possible, you know. But yeah, so, you know, spreading the wealth around Pima County has been really good. So a lot of positive comments, a couple questionable ones from the community at large so far since last Wednesday. A good post overall. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's always good to hear positive feedback. Anything else for Jason?
I'll take more positive feedback if anyone has that. I love that. I can do that all day long.
That was in general, Jason.
Oh, okay.
Okay, not hearing any more comments or questions. Let's go on to the next topic. Tom McGovern, report on RTA, please.